Okay, thank you. Just keep it there for now. All right, Matthew 13. Let's read from verse 1. So we're in Matthew, if someone hasn't noticed. And last week we did chapter 12. We spoke a little bit about Lord of the Sabbath and how it's not about us, it's about Him. There was a couple other things. That's what stood out to me the most. But all right, so that same day that He was speaking, though Matthew is not written chronologically. One day we can do a study of which chapters came after which, but that's not today. Either way, so that same day, Yeshua went out of the house and sat down by the lake. But such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the crowd stood on the shore. He told them many things in parables. A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he sowed, some seed fell alongside the path. The birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky patches where there was not much soil. It sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun had risen, the young plants were scorched, and since their roots were not deep, they dried up. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. But others fell into rich soil and produced grain, 100 or 60 or 30 times as much as had been sown. Those who have ears, let them hear. Let's pause there. Okay. So, first thing that stands out to me here is that Yeshua went out of the house and sat down by the lake. Seems like a really random thing to include in the gospel of the Messiah of the world. He went out of the house and sat down by the lake. You know, sometimes, I know with my life, I've been very, I don't know if pedantic is the right word, what's the word? Nitpicky, I'd want God to micromanage me. I'd be like, hey, would it be okay, God, if I went and sat down by the lake? And then, you know, most of the time I don't really hear anything, and then I'm kind of like struggling, is this His will? Can I sit down by the lake? And it's a simple thing, just sit down by the lake. And what I started to realize is that we don't need God to micromanage our every decision. God came to God made Adam and said, here's the earth, have authority over it, subdue it. Name the animals. Adam was not supposed to come back and say, what do you think of this one? Can I name this one a lion? Can I name that one a giraffe? God gave him the authority. Sometimes we become timid with the authority God has given, and we start to second guess ourselves. We start to, should I do this? Should I do that? God, what do you think? I'm not saying we shouldn't seek counsel and find out what is your will. I mean, we know that even though God had said, when you come into the land, you're going to fight wars and you're going to fight against enemies. But David would always say, God, should I go or not? Is this your will? Will you give them into my hands? And as soon as he says, yes, you should go, David goes in faith. But David is not questioning every swing of the sword. Should I swing it this way first or that way? Should I take 4 stones or 5 stones? No, God has said, I will give him into your hands. The rest is up to me. I get to make the decisions. So the message here is that if you are not stepping out of covenant by what you're about to do, then you're okay. There's nothing wrong with sitting by a lake. So you don't have to question whether it is God's will or not. If He wants you to instead go and pray, He'll tell you. He'll put it in your heart or send someone to tell you. But barring that, sit down by the lake. But such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the crowd stood on the shore. I heard something from a pastor once saying, it's cool how this happened because sound travels better over water than over land. It's like, that's interesting. And kind of he uses whatever is around him for the benefit of the kingdom. Whether it's your boat, whether it's the environment, like when they were gathered at Mount of Beatitudes, there was a natural amphitheater. He uses everything for the sake of the kingdom. Is your house, your lake, your yard surrendered for the sake of the kingdom? Or when you go to gym, do you say, no, this is for gym only. I cannot speak about my God here? When you go to the park or the lake, do you say, no, this is about me, I just want to relax and, no one must come and bother me? Imagine you get your day off from your job, because this was his job, he was a teacher, so it's now his day off, he's going to go sit by the lake. And then a crowd comes and gathers. They've made no appointment. There was no posters, hey, this Saturday, come to the lake. No, nothing like that. They just show up at his doorstep. Not even his doorstep, he's just, and he can't get a moment. And he doesn't say, oh guys, listen, we have Bible studies on Mondays and Wednesdays, so just speak to so-and-so and they'll tell you the details. No, he feeds them because they're here to hear from God. Sometimes the timing with which people come to you and they say, hey, I need prayer, hey, I need help, is not convenient. Do we push them away? Send them to somebody else? Or do we acknowledge that, okay, right now, right here, the kingdom of heaven is in play, and it's my job to serve. Even though there's no building, there's no microphone, there's no, chairs and whatnot, I'm going to make the most of this situation for the sake of the kingdom. Is it making sense? You can do this in your home, at work, whenever there's an opportunity that interrupts your lunch break, and you're like, you ever have those moments where it's like you haven't eaten all day, and then you finally get your sandwich out, and then just as you're about to eat it, there's that, it's like, that's what this is. And he doesn't complain. He's like, yeah, this is why I'm here. What other reason am I here? But to serve you. Okay, let's keep going. So then it says, he told them many things in parables. Let's do a detour quickly to Psalm 78. Psalm 78, I'm going to read from verse 1. Listen, my people, to my teaching. Turn your ears to the words from my mouth. I will speak to you in parables and explain mysteries from days of old. Okay. Now, he goes on, and this is a great song. Go through it. I think you'll be blessed by it. What I want to ask is, are there any parables in the Torah? Does God ever use a parable to teach in the Torah? Can you think of a time? There's songs. There's a song of Moses coming up next week's parasha, which is poetic and it's got that parable essence. But in terms of a teaching, when God gives instructions or tells you what to do, does he ever speak in a parable? Or let's just put it that way. Since Torah is not actually law, but Torah is instruction. So when God gives you an instruction, like he gave to Adam, like he gave to Joseph when he said, marry this woman, don't put her away, marry her, because the son in her womb is mine. In those moments, is he using parables? He speaks directly, right? Do this thing. Go to the widow in that place, she's going to feed you and give you bread. Go to that valley. Go, he speaks very clearly. So why is it then now the prophet has prophesied that, I'm going to speak to in parables? Why do they need to be spoken to in parables? I want this to be in your mind. And what I want you to keep in mind is that God doesn't speak in parables when he's instructing you. He speaks directly. But there are times after the Torah that he starts to use parables to speak to his own people. Because by then, they're not listening. It would make no difference if he told them directly, stop sinning. They wouldn't listen, they wouldn't hear him. And now he starts to speak in a parable. And we're going to see this as we go, but just keep that in mind. Before we go, just want to explain it a bit more. Okay, wait, let's go to Isaiah 29. I don't know if we'll have time to do that again. Sorry, hold on. No, let's go to Isaiah 6. Let's do this. You go to Isaiah 6. I'm going to go to Isaiah 29. Someone with a loud voice, could you please read Isaiah 6 from verse 9 to 10?
And he said, yes, go and say this to the people. Listen carefully, but do not understand. Watch closely, but learn nothing. Harden the hearts of these people. Plug their ears and shut their eyes. That way, they will not see with their eyes, nor hear with their ears, nor understand with their hearts, and turn to me for healing.
So, the prophecy is, God is actually saying, make their hearts not perceive. Stop up their ears, shut up their eyes. Because what's the point? At this point, he says, yes, you hear, but you don't understand. You certainly see, but you don't get the point. Have you ever been in a situation where you're about to do something you shouldn't do? So God kind of trips you. Maybe the car won't start. Or maybe, the power goes out or whatever. And then you fix it in order to continue doing what you shouldn't do. And then once again, it's like malfunctions. And at that point, you get this feeling, maybe I shouldn't go ahead with this. Maybe I should stop. But then you go on. And this is what he's saying. You hear, but you don't understand. You certainly see, but you don't get the point. So the prophecy is going to come to you and say, actually, I'm going to close your eyes and block your ears so that you won't see and you won't hear. Otherwise, you might understand, you might make teshuvah, repentance, and be healed. But because of the way you've been behaving, I'm not allowing you to do that. Because if you do that, I will have to heal you. But because of your behavior, you will have to go through some consequence and some punishment for some time. This is what I want you to keep in mind. Isaiah 29, I'm going to read it really quickly from verse 9. I'll let you catch up. Isaiah 29, from verse 9. If you make yourselves stupid, you will stay stupid. If you blind yourselves, you will stay blind. You are drunk, but not from wine. You are staggering, but not from strong liquor. For Adonai has poured over you a spirit of lethargy. He has closed your eyes, that is the prophets. He has covered your heads, that is the seers. For you, this whole prophetic vision has become like the message in a sealed up scroll. When one gives it to someone who can read, he says, please read this. He says, I can't because it's sealed. If the scroll is given to someone who can read with the request, please read this, he says, I can't read. Because these people approach me with empty words, and the honor they bestow me is mere lip service, while in fact they have distanced their hearts from me, and their fear of me is human commandments, or a mitzvah of human tradition. Therefore, I will have to keep shocking these people with astounding and amazing things until the wisdom of their wise ones vanishes and the discernment of their discerning ones is hidden away. This is part of the reason he spoke to them in parables. But let's hear what the disciples ask and how he explains it. Then the Talmidim came and asked Yeshua, why are you speaking to them in parables? He answered, because it has been given to you to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but it has not been given to them. It has been given to you to know the secrets of the kingdom, but it has not been given to them. What does that mean? Let's go to Mark 4, just to look at this in the way that Mark recorded it. Go to chapter 4, verse 10. When Yeshua was alone, the people around him with the 12 asked him about the parables. He answered them, "To you, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given. But to those outside, everything is in parables, so that they may be always looking but never seeing, always listening but never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven." Then Yeshua said to them, "Don't you understand this parable? How will you be able to understand any parable?" And then he goes on. It is so critical that we understand the parables, but more so that we understand that we have been given to know. And he says, to those who are outside, they haven't been given. In other words, when he speaks in parables to them, it's because they are outside. Though they are Israel, but they are outside the kingdom. You could be in church, but outside the kingdom. But notice, it's the disciples who come forward and ask the question. Too many times in our lives, we are satisfied to just hear the message, and that's it. We don't become students after that and actually inquire, what did you mean? And test it. But if you're saying this, but I'm seeing that, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense when you say it's this way, but then it looks like it's the other way. That's a student. We're not just going to understand the whole word in a day or in a lesson, but there is a need for us to identify as Talmidim, as a student of the word. Paul says to Timothy, study to show yourself approved, as a worker who doesn't need to be ashamed because he rightly handles the word of truth. Someone who can rightly handle the word of truth. So someone says something, something like, I don't know, God will forgive me if I do this, God's okay with this. And then you, as someone who can rightly handle the truth, can respond to them and say, well, he either will or he won't, depending on A, B, or C. Because the lips of a priest should preserve knowledge. And that's what we are. We are kings and priests. But let's keep going. So, let's go to verse 16 of chapter 13 of Matthew. But you, how blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. Yes, indeed, I tell you that many a prophet and many a righteous person longed to see the things you are seeing but did not see them, and to hear the things you are hearing but did not hear them. So, listen to what the parable of the sower means. Whoever hears the message about the kingdom but doesn't understand it is like the seed sown along the path. The evil one comes and seizes what was sown in his heart. This is one of the reasons it's extremely critical to understand the parable and to not just take it at surface value. One of the things I appreciate about this church is that we could always ask questions. We didn't have to just sit back and listen, though recently there's been less questions. I don't know if it's because we're good students or if we're just afraid to ask. My teachers in high school would say, never be afraid to ask a question, because the likelihood is the question you have and you're struggling with, 9 other people in this room have it. So when you ask the question, other people are like, yeah, in their heads, they're like, I also don't get it. And then the answer comes and now everybody benefits because of your question. That's the point of a yeshiva. A yeshiva, that's a Hebrew word for school, where you would be studying to become like your rabbi or to become a rabbi. And that's what the idea is. Yeshua, Jesus did not say to his disciples, go out into all the world and make churches. That was not the Great Commission. The Great Commission is go out into all the world and make disciples of all the nations. A disciple is not someone who just accepts Christ and then you move on to the next town and make more converts. It's not about making converts, it's about teaching them to obey everything that I have taught you. So there's a need for us to identify that, okay, now that I believe in Christ, I need to be a disciple. I need to be discipled by someone who has been discipled. I have to submit to their authority. And whether I like it or not, sometimes I might disagree with what they say, which is the point. If you agree with everything your teacher says, that's not submission. You already agree. It's like if the husband says to the wife, this is what we're going to do. We can't pay for that bill this month. We have to take care of school fees and this and that. And, we're still doing this project. So this is what we're going to do. She might not like it, but that's when she has an opportunity to submit. Because submission is when you don't agree. Say, okay, I would do it a different way, but I submit to your will. Even Christ. Christ, just before the crucifixion, said, not my will, but yours. That's submission. In other words, his will was not to go through with it at that point. But he's like, okay, but you know what? I'm going to surrender my will. So the idea of being a student is that you don't need to automatically agree with everything your teacher says. You need to question, test, investigate, and say, okay, I hear you say this is the case. But when I read Mark, when I read Isaiah, that's not what I see. That's the process of growth. It's not good enough to disagree and then leave the church. You need to be a student, test it, bring it, because everybody's going to benefit, because we're all Talmidim, we're all students. So, he says, how blessed are your eyes because they see, your ears because they hear. You're hearing things that many prophets and righteous people longed to hear, but they couldn't hear it. Because this is not about how good is your righteousness, you're standing before God. This is about grace. They were not chosen as the 12 Talmidim or the 12 disciples because they were excellent Bible students or righteous or prophets. They were chosen because of grace. And that's why you were chosen as well. Christ chose you. You might feel like you just fell into this walk. He chose you. He chose you, and he believes you can be like him. He believes you can understand all of this. Verbatim. Well, at least kind of. Close. Verbatim. Why not? He believes you can be like him. The miracles, the healings, the prophecies, everything. That is the call. That's why he called you. He would not have called you if you couldn't make the cut. In other words, the reason we needed a human Messiah is because we are human. Christ cannot redeem animals. He cannot redeem angels. It's not about power. It's about we need a kinsman redeemer. In other words, the one who redeems us has to be from our family. Like Ruth and Boaz. He could redeem her because he was part of her family. So Christ, as part of the human family, can redeem us as humans. That's why he had to be human, so that he can redeem us. And that's why the angels who sinned don't have that redemption, because they're not human. Anyways, so if you don't understand the word that is sown, the enemy is coming and he's going to steal it out of your heart. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. It's going to happen. So the onus is on you to make sure you understand. Because there's nothing wrong with the message. The message is fine. But if your heart is hard and you are on the path, if you're a spectator, if you're at church as a bystander, watching from the audience, you're watching the game, or a commentator, you're on the path. I don't mean you're on the path, I mean you're like the seed that was sown along the path. It gets trodden on, and then the birds come and they steal it, they eat it up. Because you're not going to do anything with it. So it's so critical that you don't let the moment pass without your understanding. And if the moment does pass, you come back afterwards like the disciples did and say, what did you mean? Let's move on. Okay, verse 20. The seed sown on rocky ground is like a person who hears the message and accepts it with joy at once, but has no root in himself. Sometimes it's like, okay, guys, we're going to fast. Yeah, let's fast. Let's do it. And then 2 weeks goes by before we've announced the dates, and then it's like, I need to gym. I need to do this. And then excuses come up. Because sometimes we don't fully prepare ourselves for the message. We don't fully understand, count the cost of discipleship. And I'm not saying count it and it's too big, so walk away. I'm just saying count it and recognize it's a high cost. It's going to cost you everything. There's a saying, Yeshua gave everything for you. And salvation, as much as it's freely offered, it's going to cost you everything in return. Because you have to give up your life. You have to give up your will. What does it profit you if you gain everything but you lose your life? What does it profit? You've actually lost. That's actually a loss in the business sense. Because you had your life, and then you gained everything, and now you have, you don't have your life, so you don't have everything. Because you can't have everything if you're not alive. So the only good business decision would be to lose yourself so that you can gain everything. I'm going to keep going. He says, he stays on for a while, but as soon as some trouble or persecution arises on account of the message, he immediately falls away. My brothers, my fathers, my aunties, my aunts, my uncles. Persecution is part of the package. It's coming. It's going to happen. Persecution, discomfort, struggle, not having enough money towards the end of the month, all of it is part of the package. I'm not saying we were destined to be poor. I'm just saying we all have a struggle that makes this walk difficult, that makes us want to throw in the towel. That is par for the course. You are on the right journey if that is happening. Because if it's not happening, maybe we should talk. If your life is bliss all the time and you're a Christian, I think we might need to have a conversation about your Christianity. Because Christ said, the world doesn't love me, it's not going to love you. So if the world loves you, if your work environment, which is so worldly, if they love you, I think there's a problem with your Christianity. Because why would they be so comfortable with you if you were so much like Christ? If they're so worldly. So, persecution is part of the course. It's part of the package, it's part of the work, the walk, the trouble, the persecution. It's gonna come. And the reason that we fall away sometimes when that happens is because when the seed was planted, it wasn't planted deep. It was planted very shallow, on the surface level. We didn't really, that 70 times 7 forgiveness course that we did, where we had to really search our hearts to find out, is there someone I have not forgiven? That's the kind of digging you got to do for the seed. You got to fight for it. It's like climbing a mountain or riding a bicycle on a mountain. You're either going up or you're going down. In fact, if you are not pushing, if you're not pedaling, you're going down. That's what this walk is like. The minute you start coasting and you're just like, let me just enjoy this, you're going down. Every moment, every day has to be a push and a struggle. Think about a seed that grows. It doesn't have an easy life before it sprouts. It's in darkness, completely. And then it just starts reaching out, and it's like, which way is up? And it's like, I don't know. And there's a time Jono, what's the germination period for some of, let's say, spinach?
The average is
7 to 14 days. So 2 weeks without seeing nothing. Is it alive? Is it sprouting? I don't know. And then after 2 weeks, there we go. Now, there's some people, as soon as they get the message, they start to sprout. It's like, how's that possible? Oh, Baruch Hashem, wow, they must have the Spirit. Not necessarily. It means they're very close to the surface. They're not deep underground. Because it takes 2 weeks for that stalk or for that sprout to appear above the surface of the ground. So if your word was planted today and then immediately now you've got this, you haven't fully planted that seed. And you're going to fall away when persecution comes, which is the sun rising and it gets scorched, it's too dry, and your roots are just not deep because the seed was not truly received. Now, the seed sown among thorns stands for someone who hears the message, but it is choked by the worries of the world and the deceitful glamour of wealth, so that it produces nothing. It cannot produce. Okay, so we had a seed that doesn't even germinate because it was stolen. We had the seed that germinates quickly because it wasn't planted properly. And then we have this seed that's planted in the wrong place. Or rather, the heart it's planted in is full of other things. You want the BMW, and you want the salary of that much. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with BMWs, and there's nothing wrong with a 6-figure salary every month. The problem is when you make that your life's work. The problem is when you come out of your beam and you're like, yeah, I'm a man. Yeah. That's the problem. When your ego and your pride is invested in what you drive, or it's invested in the house you live in, because as soon as the enemy is like, I'm taking that away, where are you? Now you're depressed. Now you feel like no one loves you because you convinced yourself that they love me because of my car. They love me because of my beautiful wife. They love me because of I can always buy them drinks. Next round's on me, and now they love me. So now without the money, what are you? Or my children love me because I can get them an Xbox. Yeah, I'm a good dad. And then when times are rough, now you struggle with your father-son relationship because you feel like your son won't receive you as a father because you can't get him the next game. Because you've invested your identity in your ability to provide. That's the problem. The problem is when you make that thing your goal to the point that your decisions are influenced by this thing. So, I'll give you an example. If I want a 6-figure salary every month, now I've got an option. Let's say someone comes to me, they need counseling on a Sunday afternoon. Okay? Now, I could either work on my business, serve my client, and deliver, and tomorrow they pay me, 300,000 Rand. Or I can listen to my brother who's in need, and he's just going to complain. And some people, they just talk and talk. And it's like, you should just do this, but they don't listen. But the thing is, they need you. Regardless of, are they going to listen? Are they going to change now? But that's not the point. The point is not for you to diagnose whether they're going to change or not. The point for you is to listen, to give advice, to give counsel, to be Yeshua to them. If they came to Yeshua on a Sunday afternoon, what would he choose? And if he would choose them and you would not, then you're not abiding. Because you're chasing the 6-figure salary. I'll put it this way, one more thing. Let's say it's a Shabbat. It's a Sabbath day, we should not work. Okay, now maybe you're short on rent, or you're short on groceries, or something. And you're thinking, if I just do this one trade on the Sabbath, if I just, do do that extra bit of work, whatever the case might be, plumbing job, this, that, maybe I make it to the end of the month. But now you've changed your source of provision from the Heavenly Father to whoever's going to pay this next bill. That's the problem. Keeping Sabbath is more about faith in God that He's going to provide for me. I don't need to work 7 days a week than me trying to do it with my own strength. Because then I'm saying, I'm the creator, I'm the provider, I will do this in my strength. It takes a faithful heart to be able to say, look, I could work today, but I'm not going to. And it's not rules and obligations. I mean, it is a rule, but I'm not doing it because of that. I'm doing it because I trust that God can provide. I don't have to work. How many times do you say, oh man, I need a holiday? Oh man, I just need to get away. I just need rest. Oh, my back hurts. Oh, this, oh, that. And God is like, okay, once a week. And then you say, no, but I want to work a bit more. Makes no sense. Just trust Him. Okay. I want to just a bit longer. Okay, just hold on. Let me ask the question. What does a Shabbat look like? What does a Shabbat look like?
Good food.
Good food, okay, yeah. So we'll come back to that. Okay, good food. What else does it look like? Resting and gathering, okay. Fellowship, yes. What else? Serving others, okay. How? I mean, Wimpy people serve me. So if I go to Wimpy, are they
Serving others for the right reasons.
for the right reasons? What's the right reasons? If someone says, hey, help me dig this ditch over here so that I can, I don't know, have a pool. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be of service. I love my neighbor as myself. I want a pool, so I want him to have a pool. So let's dig this ditch and give him a pool. Is that, I'm serving. Let's define the right reasons, because it can get a bit gray. What's the right reason of service?
There's a need.
Sorry? Say that again?
There's a need.
There's a need. Okay. He might say, it's hot. I need this pool. Is that a need? Tammy said to bring them closer to God. Can we define that? Okay. Does the tabernacle, so you remember they were in the wilderness and God said, build a tabernacle and I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to dwell in the tabernacle among you. Okay. Now, is it okay to build the tabernacle to bring people closer to God on the Sabbath? Can you build the tabernacle? Jono says no. What does everyone else say? Hey? Okay, Tammy says no as well. Does anyone think it's okay to build the tabernacle? Not just the church, but the tabernacle. Can you build that on Shabbat?
It's a work of the priest.
It's a work of the, okay, we're getting work of the, excuse me?
The priest works on the Sabbath.
The priest works on the Sabbath. Is it a priestly job to build the tabernacle? That's a good point. I like what you're saying. Is it a priestly job to build the tabernacle? What are the jobs of priests? What does God tell the priests to do? To serve in the temple. So, to be the ones officiating in the tabernacle, but he doesn't say the priests must build the tabernacle. He says, let the skilled worksmen of crafts and metals and sewing and everyone who's skilled in something, and he even gave his spirit for the others to know how to do these things and to work with metal and things like that. So, is it okay to build the tabernacle on Shabbat? It's not. In fact, that's one of the things, right after God finishes with all the instructions about Shabbat and he forgives the people after Moses was interceding for them, the very next chapter it says, You shall not make a fire on the Sabbath. And that's been interpreted in a various amount of ways. But if you look at the context of what was happening from chapter 25 of Exodus, where he starts saying, bring an offering. That's terumah. That's the parashat terumah. And then it goes up until about chapter 32, 31. And then it goes into the next chapter, and then he says, by the way, don't make a fire on the Sabbath. You would need a fire to work. And he's saying, as much as we've been talking about the tabernacle and all that, it's not that important that you need to be doing this on my Sabbath, on your Sabbath as well. I say your Sabbath because Exodus 31 tells us, it says, it is my Sabbath, that's what God is saying. And then he says, it is holy to you. It is set apart for you. It is also your Sabbath. It's his feast day, but he made it for you. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It's your Sabbath. So what I'm saying is, there's a way to properly partake in Sabbath, but sometimes we can make excuses and say, yeah, this is going to bring someone closer to God, so I can spend time on this. But it's false. It's my interpretation. It's my point of view. So what does God say about Shabbat? What should we do? Has he told us? Okay, we mentioned gathering, we mentioned fellowship, we mentioned rest. What else does he tell us about Shabbat? Excuse me? Okay, it's for him. What else? How should we behave? How does he tell us to behave? Has he told us to behave?
Compassion. How do we behave?
Okay,
Compassion.
I want to ask the question, where do we get it? I'm not saying you're wrong, but where do we get that he says, be compassionate on the Sabbath?
Messiah healed.
Would you cause to language only for interpretation?
Yes.
Would you accommodate what
Okay?
Healed.
All right, so it's good to do good on the Sabbath. Okay, that's a good one. Sorry, you were still saying while he was speaking? Or did he sum it up?
Healing.
Okay, good point. What about Isaiah 56 or Isaiah 58? Ever read it? Let's quickly go to Isaiah 56. This is a bit of a tangent, but that's okay because we are students and we are studying. Isaiah 56, and then I'm going to touch on 58, and then we'll come back to Matthew. Okay, Isaiah 56. Observe justice, do what is right, for my salvation is close to coming, my righteousness to being revealed. Happy is the person who does this, anyone who grasps it firmly, who keeps the Sabbath and does not profane it, and keeps himself from doing any evil. I want to just scroll down to verse 6. And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to serve him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his workers. So we're talking about foreigners here. He says, all who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it, and hold fast to my covenant. I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. So, this is showing us, this is one of the verses that shows us, number one, as a Gentile who is, as someone who is not an Israelite, a blood descendant of Jacob, Sabbath is for me too. In verse 3 of chapter 56, it said, a foreigner joining Adonai should not say that Adonai will separate me from his people. So Christ or God is saying that you're a Gentile, but don't think you're excluded. Don't think I'm going to separate you from my people. Sabbath is for you if you want to be part of my covenant. Okay, and I I just feel like I need to explain that a bit more. Okay. So what covenant are we in today? As Christians, what covenant are we in? Are we not in covenant? The renewed covenant. Okay, we're in the renewed covenant. The renewed covenant, we read about that in Hebrews chapter 8. We read about that in Jeremiah chapter 31. One of the things that it says about it is, I will put my Torah within them, and I will write it on their hearts. The same Torah that was mediated through Moses, the same Torah Moses brought down from Mount Sinai, God is saying, I'm going to take that Torah and put it in you. At the end of Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13, it says, thus the new covenant is here and the old covenant is become obsolete. It is vanishing altogether. It sounds like we don't have to keep the Torah when it says that. But if the new covenant, the essence of it is that the Torah will be in you, then the Torah part of the covenant hasn't changed. The change is that the covenant is no longer on stone tablets. It's no longer written externally on tablets of stone in the Ark of the Covenant, in the Holy of Holies, in the tabernacle. That's where it used to be. It used to be there, where God is. We can't approach there. If we go there, we'll die. Or they'll stop us before we die, but if we manage to get past them, we'll die. So God is saying, now I'm moving the Holy of Holies. I've torn the curtain. I'm moving that Holy of Holies into you, because I am coming to dwell within you. And the Torah used to be in that place. So he's saying, I'm bringing that Torah into your heart. I'm going to write it on your heart. Because the problem, Hebrews 8 also says this, he finds fault with them. It doesn't say that the covenant, the old covenant was the problem. The people were the problem, because it wasn't in them. So now God puts it in them. Are you with me? So Shabbat is for us. And if you read Isaiah 58, I'm not going to go through it right now, but it will tell you how should you behave on a Shabbat. Some teaching will say that this is specifically for 2 weeks from now, roughly, when we're going to be doing Yom Kippur. They say that this is describing that Shabbat, because it's about a fast. Though the characteristics of this Shabbat are so Shabbati and godly, you should be doing them all the time, with every Shabbat. Back to Matthew. Okay.
I just say something on the covenant thing. So we're strictly in the sixth covenant now. I'm going into detail about that now, but I mean every single covenant that was made encompassed everything else of the covenant that was before. So there's no passing away of that covenant. It's just a renewed, it's bringing it into the present, but it never ever abolished anything before. And Yeshua himself said, I haven't come to abolish it.
Amen.
I've come to fulfill. So every covenant, so there's one more covenant left, which will be the seventh one. It's the covenant of peace. You can make a study of that. And what I've done is I've seen that even Shabbat, a simple thing, well, we think it's a simple thing, but it was already established with Adam, the covenant of Shabbat. And then he comes to Mount Sinai and he reestablishes Noah. Everyone knew, Abraham knew Shabbat. So it was never a thing of it was passing away, it encompassed. So every covenant, like this new covenant, written on our hearts, it didn't do away with or change it even. It just encompassed it in a different way. So tablets of stone, hard heart, heart of flesh, soft heart, he puts it on there. So it's on the tablets of stone in our hearts with a soft heart.
Amen. Yeah, I think it would be good to do a covenant study again, or just to revise it, so that we're just all on the same page. Okay. I'm just trying to find my place. So verse 22. Yeah, the seed that was sown among thorns stands for someone who hears the message, but it is choked by the worries of the world and the deceitful glamour of wealth, so that it produces nothing. However, what was sown on rich soil is the one who hears the message, understands it. Such a person will surely bear fruit, 100 or 60 or 30 times what was sown. So, it's to hear and understand. To show that you understand, you're going to do. If you don't do that which you understand, you haven't fully understood it. To truly know a truth, it has to be all-encompassing. It's not just your head, it's your heart, it's your hands, it's everything in you to truly know something. Some of us know laziness very well. Or we know gossip very well. Like without even thinking, your mouth opens and you're already talking about somebody. But what it has to be is that when your heart has the word in it, and it's full of the word, out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. So perhaps we should check our hearts. Verse 24. Before I go on, I just want to ask the question. So we've got 6 minutes. Can we go through the parables quickly? It's going to take a little bit more than 6 minutes, and then we end there. Is that okay? Anybody need to go somewhere? Does anyone need a body break? Because we can pause. We good? Coffee, anyone? Okay, we're good. All right.
You're making.
I'm not making. No, I'm not. I was going to ask you to make for me. No, it's fine. Okay. All right. So let's go from verse 24. Yeshua put before them another parable. Okay. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in the field. So as we said earlier, the seed is not the problem. But here we're going to see 2 types of seed. So he sowed good seed in his field, but while people were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. Could you show us? Yes, there we go. He sowed weeds among the wheat, then went away. The wheat sprouted and formed heads of grain. The weeds also appeared. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads of grain, the weeds also appeared. Okay, so they sprouted at the same time. They took them out at the same time to grow and to appear. Okay, then the owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The servants asked him, "Then do you want us to go and pull them up?" But he said, "No, because if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot some of the wheat at the same time. Let them both grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers to collect the weeds first and tie them in bundles to be burned, but to gather the wheat into my barn." Okay, so if you look up there, that's not very clear. Okay, but you can kind of see it. They look very similar. The one on the left is called darnel. It's got this really scientific name, I forgot how to pronounce it, but it invades wheat crop, and it's actually poisonous, but more about that some other time. One thing that's interesting about this darnel on my right is that when it's mature, it's black, it turns like a black color, whereas wheat will be brown in color. The darnel, when it matures, it's upright. It's like that. But the wheat, when it matures, it does that. It like bends over. And it's kind of saying, what kind of fruit do you have? They both have spikes on them. Those, what were they called? Spikelets. I think those are called spikelets. I'm not a wheat farmer. But the idea is they both are producing something. The one is making it upright, the other one is making it kind of bow. And if your fruit is not making you humble yourself, it's not the right fruit. If your fruit is like, "Oh, look at me, I play the guitar," it's the wrong fruit. Even so, it is not our job to say, "Oh, good fruit, bad fruit, come out of my church." The servant said, "Should we uproot them?" Christ says no. If you do that, you might, in so doing, cause someone else to stumble. How many times, like, I'm not going to go there, but the point is just that he says, leave them until the harvest. Let both grow together. In other words, Yeshua washed Judas' feet. He didn't say, oh no, you're a betrayer. Please leave my supper. He knelt, he got on his knees, and he washed his feet. The same way as everybody else. He gave him power to cast out demons. Judas had power to cast out demons. Judas had power to heal the sick. Having the Holy Spirit does not guarantee you a seat in the kingdom. It only means God is using you the same way he can use a donkey. Because a donkey could speak. That doesn't mean the donkey is going to be in the kingdom. So, what I'm saying is, let's not be so preoccupied on finding out who's in, who's out. Because sometimes we'll be like, okay, but if they still keep Christmas, and if they do this, and if they do that, and we become so concerned with trying to make a doctrine to find out who's going to be in the kingdom and who's not. That's not your job. We have a judge for that. And it says, he will separate the sheep from the goats. He knows. And the thing is, you might have someone who is sinning, and then right at the end they change. And you don't know that they've changed. So, stop trying to diagnose who's in the kingdom and who's not. Do your job. Be wheat. Bear good fruit. So that when the angels come, they will take you along. And you will be bundled with the ones going into the house, not into the fire. That's what you need to do. And the better you do that, the better those around you will have a better chance of making it as well. Okay. Oh man. Can we go on? Okay, a little bit more. Yeshua put to them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man takes and sows in his field. This one's not there. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it grows up, it is larger than any garden plant and becomes a tree, so that the birds flying about come and nest in its branches. The kingdom of heaven is that thing you underestimate. And you think to yourself, ish, if I say no to this girl, people are gonna say I'm whack. You know, if I'm just, as an example, let's say your friends are kind of like, hey bro, check this girl out. She's not kosher, she's not, anyone you should be talking to, but now you kind of are prompted to go and you're lenient towards that side because, you want to be cool. You want to be liked. Or maybe you're just in a hurry to be in a relationship and now you're taking the first one who's available. Why am I saying this? Because when you consider what God has said compared to what the world is offering, sometimes it's like such a small seed and you're like, what difference can this make? God, I need this and you're offering me this tiny little thing. You really want me to wait 5 years to meet someone and I don't know where she is? What if she's in India right now? How am I going to get to India? Or whatever the case might be. Don't underestimate the seed. Don't underestimate what God can do with something small. He made a planet of 7 billion plus people with how many? With one. One. Don't underestimate the seed. When you study Genesis 2, it says, at that time, there was yet no trees, no bushes, no shrubs, no plants. You go outside today, they're everywhere. Don't underestimate what God can do. Okay. Almost done. And he told them yet another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with a bushel of flour, then waited until the whole batch of dough rose. I think I'm going to stop with this one. I'm not sure, but okay. So she took some yeast, she mixed it with some flour, and then she waited until the whole batch of dough rose. Some versions will say she buried it in the flour. Sometimes the kingdom of heaven is about, okay, here's the solution. This yeast is going to make everything rise. But what we're going to do, we're going to bury it and hide it. It's like, where did it go? But the point is, you got to wait now. It's a waiting game. Before you can bake that bread, it has to rise. Anyone who's baked bread before will tell you, you need to let the bread proof before you bake it. And that's kind of like what God is doing with us and with the kingdom right now. He is proofing it before he puts it in the oven. Because it has to expand to its biggest size. Then you're still going to knead it again, and then it's going to proof again, and now you're going to bake it. And sometimes we get disappointed and frustrated. God, I need this, and it's like, and it's hard to believe that something this small can become that big. But don't underestimate the kingdom. Can I go a little bit more? Yeah, we're only 4 minutes over. Okay. So then it says, all these things Yeshua said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without using a parable. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophets. I will open my mouth in parables. I will say what has been hidden since the creation of the universe. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. His disciples approached him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. He answered, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. As for the good seed, these are the people who belong to the kingdom. And the weeds are the people who belong to the evil one. The enemy who sows them is the adversary, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all the things that cause people to sin. I hope that's not you. I hope that, I'll speak to myself as well, I hope that that's not us. That we don't cause people to sin. That we are not a stumbling block. If you know someone struggles with something, you don't bring them near that thing. You might be perfectly fine having 2 beers and it's enough. But someone else might have had a history of alcohol abuse, and you kind of like, it's just 2 beers. Now, he might stop at 2 here, but now you've opened up a door. And this week, every day, he's going to have 2, and then maybe 3, and then maybe 5, and then maybe we don't hear from him for 2 weeks. I don't know. But the point is, let's not be a stumbling block to people. And for that, we actually have to know each other. We have to know our lives. What's your struggles? What do you deal with? If someone struggles with his eyes and I keep on wearing really, tight pants. Let's say there's a guy who used to like guys. I'm always picking on girls. Let's say there's a guy who used to like guys. I'm pretty sure none of you, but let's just say. And he has a thing for, the shape and the body of, So now, let's say I now wear skinny jeans. And he's like, oh, Bills, oh man. Hi, my brother. But I'm making him struggle. Now, tonight, when he's all alone, if I don't know that was his struggle, I'm becoming a stumbling block for him. And why do I want to wear skinny jeans? Maybe it's because I look good in them, maybe. I don't know. I don't think I look good in skinny jeans. I actually should stop wearing. But the point is, maybe I think I look good in them. I'm justifying why this is okay because I want to look good, but my friend is struggling. That's not love. Think about it. It does require us to know each other better because it's hard to just assume and know what everybody's struggles are. We are almost at the finish line. All right. So he will collect all the things that cause people to sin and all the people who are far from Torah. That word in Greek is anomia, the people who are far from Torah or far from the law. It is lawlessness. This word comes up in Matthew 7 verse 23 when Christ says, he will say to some people who say, Lord, Lord, we healed the sick in your name. We prophesied in your name. We did many mighty things in your name. And he'll say, I didn't know you. You guys know the scripture. That's good. So everyone who is far from Torah, they will be thrown into the fiery furnace, where people will wail and grind their teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, or whoever has ears, let him hear. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure in a field, hidden in a field. Okay, hold on. Let me pause. We all have ears, don't we? What does Christ mean when he says, he who has ears, let him hear? Say that again? No, I heard it from the second row. What was that? Tushma. Don't doubt yourself. It's good. Look, giving an answer is what a student does. The quicker you give the wrong answer, the quicker you can be corrected. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Be afraid to be wrong in terms of the way you live your life, but I just mean if you're asking a question or answering one, that's fine. We are here to learn. Don't be afraid. Okay. Shema, to hear and obey. He who has ears, in other words, remember why he's speaking to them in parables in the first place. It's because they have ears but they're not listening. That's why he's speaking to them in parables. So he's saying, there shouldn't be a need for me to speak to you in parables if you would just listen and obey. Because I've said all these things already. That's what the Torah was. We already know what to do, but it's like we need reminding. So, he who has ears, let him hear. Okay. I'm going to speed through this next part. If you have any questions, just raise up your hand. I'm only going to touch on certain things. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. A man found it, hid it again, then in great joy went and sold everything he owned and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for fine pearls. On finding one very valuable pearl, he went away, sold everything he owned and bought it. Okay, I want to talk about those two quickly. Treasure hidden in a field. He finds it, hides it again, great joy, sells everything and buys the field. He sold everything. This has to be a really good treasure. I think sometimes the problem with our walk is that we don't think what we have is a treasure. We look at it as though it's a chore, an obligation. And that's the problem. The enemy wants you to look at it that way. I'll give you this example, if I may. When the Israelites were still in Egypt, God says to Moses, you must go to Pharaoh and I will bring my armies out of Egypt. There's a time he refers to them as armies. They're slaves in their minds. They see themselves as slaves. Pharaoh sees them as slaves. Egypt sees them as slaves. God sees them as armies. When they left the land, they left armed with swords. But they still don't see themselves as an army. Now, the message is, for as long as you see yourself the way the enemy wants you to look at yourself, you will never be useful to God. Not just useful, but you will always be stuck in that place. If you want to be a soccer player, let's say you want to be like Messi, or you want to be a doctor, or you want to be whatever it is, you can't wait until you are that person to start behaving like that person. If you want to have a great marriage, you can't wait until you have a great marriage to behave like a good wife. You have to make the change now. So if a Messi type of person, when I say Messi, I mean like Lionel Messi, if he is the first to arrive to practice and the last to leave, you need to be that way now. So that as you do that day by day by day, you eventually become messy. Does that make sense? So, this is a treasure. But if you don't see it as a treasure, if you don't protect it like a treasure, if you don't guard it and protect it the way Adam had to take care of the garden, it's going to become overgrown with thorns. And you're eventually going to get kicked out because you're going to do something you shouldn't do. Can we go 5 more minutes? We're almost there. Again, Kingdom of Heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for fine pearls. On finding one very valuable pearl, he went away. There's a time when Christ says, don't cast your pearls before swine. I want us to examine this because typically we think of this as meaning, if someone is going to reject your message, don't speak to him. Have you heard that interpretation? Okay, but I'd like us to examine that. Christ says, go and proclaim the gospel. Né? And then he says, if they don't receive it, what should you do? You dust yourself off, you move on, right? Okay. There's another time when, let's talk about Yeshua himself. Did he ever speak to people who wanted to kill him for what he was saying? Did he choose not to speak to them because they wanted to kill him? Let's speak about Stephen. So Stephen is being interrogated. They want to arrest him. They want to kill him. And then he knows they're not happy with what he's saying. Does he stop? Does he say, oh, these are my pearls, you're swine, I'm going to keep quiet? No, he says, I see Christ and heaven is open and he's standing at the right hand of God. Standing. Normally we'd read the verses saying he's sitting in Psalms. In other words, he's like, God, let me go. Let me go. He's like ready to come back because he's standing. Because of his love for Stephen and how Stephen is willing to do anything for him. Point is that I'm making, to cast pearls before swine cannot mean don't speak to people who don't want the message, because why then would he say walk away from people who don't want the message? You have to first speak to them to find out that they don't. In fact, he says this message must be preached to everybody. Then the end will come. So if we're going to pick and choose who we're preaching to because this is a swine and this is a swine, we're never going to finish the message, the gospel. So let's re-examine this. This person found a fine pearl and he sells everything to buy it. The fine pearl is your salvation. It is your eternal life. It is this thing that you find in God that is like, wow, I'm going to give up everything to take this pearl. I want this pearl. Proverbs tells us that wisdom is like a pearl. And we know that wisdom is the fear of Adonai. So I want to put it to you that to cast pearls before swine is to give your salvation to people who know what nothing to do with it. So people say, hey, buddy, let's go do this thing. And if you go along with them, you are going to be giving up your salvation before the swine. And then they're going to trample you because they don't care about your salvation. They're going to just, your life is done now. To cast pigs before swine means that the very thing that you treasure, that you sold everything for, you're now treating as if it's worth nothing. That's what it is. Because would it make any sense for this guy? He's been looking for pearls his whole life. He finds a valuable one. He sold everything. He buys it. And then he's like, oh, here's some pigs. That's ridiculous. But sometimes we do that with our salvation. Because we want to fit in. Because we want a moment of pleasure. Whatever the case. We cast pearl before swine. Okay. Once more, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the lake that caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen brought the net onto the shore and sat down and collected the good fish. Sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad fish away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go forth and separate the evil people from among the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where they will wail and grind their teeth. Similar stories of how with the wheat and the tares, there's going to be a separation. You should already be separate. That is the definition of holy. And if you are already separated unto God, you're okay. Then he says, have you understood all these things? I'm going to ask it to the church. Have you understood all these things? Okay, we've got 1, okay, 2, 3, okay, 4, 5, 6. This is a really staggered response. Have you understood all these things? Okay. I would ask it again, but it's all right. Then he says, every Torah teacher, every scribe who has been made into a disciple, remember the word disciple means student. Every scribe who has been made into a student for the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a home who brings out of his storage room new things and old. Meaning, you already have an understanding of the Old Testament because you're a scribe. Now you are being trained into a disciple for the kingdom, so you've got this new understanding. So now you bring out of your understanding the old things, the Shema, Israel, the Psalms, all of that, and you put it together with the teachings of Yeshua, and you've got this new and old, and that's what he's talking about. Right, when Yeshua had finished these parables, he left and went to his hometown. There he taught them in their synagogue in a way that astounded them, so that they asked, where do this man's wisdom and miracles come from? Isn't he the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother called Miriam? And his brothers Yaakov, Yosef, Shimon, and Yehuda? And his sisters, aren't they all with us? So where does he get all this? And they took offense at him, but Yeshua said to them, the only place people don't respect a prophet is in his hometown, in his own house. And he did few miracles there because of their unbelief or their lack of faith. I think that speaks volumes. I don't know if I need to elaborate on that at all. There was something I wanted to show you, but I don't think we've got the time for it. So I'm going to give it to you as homework. And then what we can do is, since you are a student, amen? Since you are a student, I'm going to give it to you as homework. I'd like you to go through these parables. And I'd like you to check how many parables are they, and what's, not looking necessarily for a theme, you're looking for the object. What is the object? I'll give you an example. I'll do one. So if we're talking about the first parable, and you want the same type of pattern throughout. If we're talking about the first parable, there's what? What's the main thing in the parable? The seed. Well done. Good student. Then the seed is, what happens to the seed? It's planted, right? It's being sown. Okay? Where is it being sown? In soil. Okay. Now, I'll do just one more just so that you can understand. I'm not going to do a seed one. I'll do the yeast. The yeast. So, he told them another parable. It's like the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in a bushel of flour. So we're talking about what? Instead of seed, it's what? Yeast. And it's put in flour, and then it rises. So I want you to do that type of a thing, and then I'm going to show you something cool. Ne? Okay. All right, that is Matthew 13. Are there any questions? Yes?
Can a tear become a wheat?
No.
Can a wheat become a tear?
No.
Okay.
Very, I like where you're going with that. Because the wheat, so the question for the camera, can tear become wheat? Can wheat become tear? No. The one who plants it that's what it becomes. So in the beginning, God made every tree and every seed after its kind. Yeah. So an apple tree cannot produce bananas. And, et cetera, et cetera. A horse cannot produce a lion. because it follows the seed. So the seed of the enemy is the seed of the enemy. He planted it. If you want, the only way that you can have that person, because this is the same person, the only way that person can be of God is if that seed is uprooted and then God plants his seed. And then that matures. So that's not impossible. There's been many people like that. Manasseh, there was this king in Israel, his name was Manasseh. Terrible. Like, he did every bad thing till the point where he was taken off by an invading army, the Assyrians. And as he's being taken off, he repents. He's like, God, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop. Please save me. And they let him go. Right at the end of his life, after a life of sin and unrepentedness, rebellion. Ezekiel says this. Ezekiel says, if the righteous man turns from his righteousness and does wickedness, all his former righteousness will not be counted, and he will die wicked. But if a wicked man turns from his wickedness and does righteousness, all his former wickedness will not be counted, and he will die righteous. So it's not how you start, it's how you finish. But you don't know when you're going to finish. You could be finished right now, the second God could take your life. So you need to live every moment seeking righteousness, seeking the kingdom, so that your wickedness will not be counted. Making sense? All right. I'm assuming there's no other questions. I'm going to read a blessing as we close. Okay. I'm going to read a blessing, then I'll pray. If you'd like to stand, you may. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan et dvarcha hatanach v'brit hechadasha lechol bnei ha'adam. Baruch atah Adonai mevi et hagoel Yeshua lama'an shmo be'ahava. Praised be you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given your word, the Hebrew scriptures and the new covenant to all humanity. Praised be you, Lord, who for his own name's sake in love has brought us the Redeemer, Yeshua. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and show you his favor. May the Lord lift up his face toward you and give you peace. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneika. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Shabbat shalom.